Hey everybody, welcome back to Battlestar Galactica Remembered. And today we're going to get the old number generator out again. I wasn't picking numbers out of an actual hat. I actually put it into a number generator on my computer to pick out a number between 1 and 17, right? Why 17? Because there are 17 named episodes of Battlestar Galactica, and we're getting back to the episode review today. And the number that the computer spat out was number 14. And if you look at the episodes, number 14 was Baltar's Escape, airing on March 11th, 1979. That's actually getting near the end of the show, right? 14 out of 17 episodes. Now, what's unique about Baltar's Escape is that you really kind of had to start watching the show in the second half. And the reason why is because you had storylines and characters and things happening in prior episodes that really did affect the story arc. You know, like when we did Magnificent Warriors earlier in my previous episode review, it was kind of a throwaway. It didn't further the story. No new character was really introduced that kept going, you know, Cyrus Bellaby, that kind of thing. But with Baltar's Escape, you really need to know and have watched the show prior, at least from War of the Gods. Why is that? Well, because number one, Baltar is now a prisoner on board the prison barge. So, you know, how did he get to be a prisoner? Well, you had to have watched earlier. So that's the first thing. Second thing also, the Eastern Alliance enforcers and the Borellian Nomen, right? They each came on and were taken prisoners in various ways. The Borellian Nomen, back in The Man with Nine Lives, they were after Chameleon, right? And so that's where they were taken prisoner. And then we get into what is it's the three-part Terran story arc, right? The people and the lives and all that, and the impending war on the planet Terra. And it starts with the previous episode, Greetings from Earth. That was the special two-part, or I should say 2-hour episode that aired on one single night. It wasn't an actual two-parter. It was a 2-hour episode that aired on one night. And that's where they introduced the Eastern Alliance enforcers, right? These are kind of the Nazi-type guys, whatever. And they are taken prisoner back when they get back to the fleet at the end of that episode. So now we have Baltar's Escape. So this is the middle episode. It would eventually end in the next episode, Experiment in Terra, right? We'll eventually get to that one. But what happens, right? So while they're on the prison barge, the main focus, of course, is that they hatch a plan, right? Baltar hatches the plan with the Borellian Nomen and the Eastern Alliance enforcers to escape from the prison barge, get out of there, and, you know, be free of the colonials, right? And so there's a couple of really interesting things with this. I mean, the escape is almost secondary. The most important aspect of this show, when you start thinking about it, is a lot of, you know, commentators, if you look at those scholarly books that we talked about earlier, remember, they talk about how, you know, Battlestar Galactica, in a way, they call it one of the most, like, you know, military focused shows, one of the most fascistic shows on television. Why is that? Because, well, the military's in charge. I mean, let's face it. But, you know, we accept it and it's great. Why? Well, because, you know, who doesn't like Adama and Apollo and Starbuck, right? I mean, they're our heroes. So we accept, you know, military rule. And when you think about it, and we learn, like, without a doubt, because Apollo says it, that the fleet has been under martial law. And when you think about that, so, you know, for those of us who obviously are from Western democracies and stuff like that, countries like that, where we value our freedoms and all that, you know, the concept of being under martial law is, like, you know, abhorrent. We would never want that for the most part. Yes, we want our military protecting us. And in Battlestar situation, obviously, you know, every single moment is a matter of life and death. So you accept it, right? But it's kind of interesting that, yeah, they're under martial law, and martial law is shown to be a really good thing. All right, so that's kind of interesting there. And again, you can read, if you get some of those scholarly books, you can read a little about it. They bring up some of that about Battlestar Galactica and how they say, like, you know, no, we got to have control. You know, the military has to have control. The second thing about that is that, you know, the civilian authorities, oh my goodness, that's crazy. From the get-go, the civilian authorities, Council of the 12, are shown to be just over and over and over again to be the biggest imbeciles in the universe. I mean, you know, from Sire Yuri in Saga of a Star World saying, no, we've just been all but annihilated, but let's destroy our weapons and beg for mercy, you know, that kind of thing. to now this one, right? That every single thing that's happening, it's raising up every red flag to Adama and Apollo and Colonel Ty and everybody. And yet, no, they don't listen. They don't want to, no. And sure enough, what happens? They get taken hostage with the transfer and all that kind of stuff. So that at the point there at the end in the shuttle, they kind of tacitly just say, hey, by the way, Adama, we're giving you back control, that kind of thing. So they're always portrayed as complete nincompoops until the very end. And this segues into Sire Tinia, and she is a very interesting character. Love to kind of hate her in the beginning, right? She plays the part so well. But she finally does recognize it, and she has some great lines in there. I love the line where, Colonel Ty storms off, and Adama says, Ty's a great warrior. And she says, well, Adama, you're all great warriors, but what we need now are great diplomats. Now, ideally, yes, but when you have all these, red flag situations, you got to be a little more cautious because it could be the very end of you. And so, sure enough, Adama and Apollo and all them are proven right. They were going to escape and they're taking hostages and all this. And so even Sire Tinia finally, gets in there and says, we got to attack, Okay, great. So see, even that, right? She has a kind of come to the moment here, and she realizes we've got to attack them. We got to think along the same lines as well. Now, the last thing is, with Sire Tinia, she's played by the actress Ina Balin. And when I was doing the research for this show, I never really knew about this, but you know what? I'm just going to give you a little bit of advice. It's really cool though. If you're interested, of course, in Battlestar Galactica, most of you are. If you're subscribing, please subscribe, hit the like button there, and get notified for when I put out a new video every 2 weeks, by the way, first of the month and middle of the month. And my piece of advice to you all is, if you can, start watching Bonanza. Now, I know it sounds kind of weird. So what? Why watch an old Western primarily from the 60s and early 70s by the time it ended? Of course, Lauren Green is the main character on there, right? Ben Cartwright. But you will be amazed at how many other actors and actresses appeared on that show throughout its 14-year run. It's amazing. And when I was doing the research for Baltar's Escape, guess what I found? I think it's in an episode in 1966, if I'm correct. Ina Balin is a guest star on Bonanza, and guess who she plays? She plays the main love interest for that episode of Ben Cartwright, Lauren Green himself. It's amazing. I never knew that because I've never really watched Bonanza. I never knew a lot about it. But I've started watching it. It's on one of the cable channels and stuff over the last year. And I've started watching it. And it's amazing how many actors and actresses were on there. And you'll recognize a bunch. Oh boy, if you were watching TV like back in the 70s and 80s, you will recognize a ton of actors and actresses who guest starred on Bonanza. And Ina Balin was one of them. And she played Lauren Green's main love interest. She leaves at the end of the episode. But there she was. And so they were great friends, along with Terry Carter as Colonel Ty too. And they played the parts just so well. You love to hate Sire Tinia, don't we? We hate Sire Tinia. But in the end, it's pretty coit's right? Although we never find out, again, what happens to her, right? Colonel Ty, give me another drink. Because he sees Adama escorting Tinia around there. So it's kind of funny, but we never see her again because she was just a guest star. But that did happen. And unfortunately, if you kind of read up about her, she died in June of 1990. Very young. She had lung issues and things most of her life. And she died in June of 1990 at the age of just I think it was 52 years old, very young. In fact, if she lived well into her 80s, she could still be alive today. But unfortunately, she passed away at a relatively young age. But that was Ina Balin, a great guest star there. And what I'd like at some point here, maybe with the show, I'd like to do profiles of a lot of the guest stars. It'd be pretty cool to bring you those stories and their stories, each in their own right. Actors and actresses that are kind of, had their own following and were famous in each of their own right. But they were guest stars in Battlestar Galactica at the time. So that's kind of the story. And then, of course, they do escape. The Eastern Alliance enforcers and the Borellian Nomen. Baltar is recaptured in the funny scene with the malfunctioning Cylons, and so that's why he stays with the fleet. Now, there's one last thing that one of the books, that I mentioned before, they brought up, like, if you look really closely on the attack scene in the landing bay, the Eastern Alliance enforcers kind of run that way toward their ship. And you see that the Borellian Nomen run like a totally different direction. And they brought this up in the book. Well, where did they go? It seems like they didn't go with the enforcers, and they couldn't hide out on the Galactica forever. They didn't have their own ship. So whatever happened to them? Well, if you look very, very closely, I went and stop framed it, frame by frame. There is a shot of the Eastern Alliance enforcers getting on their ship and like moving toward the camera up the main corridor in their ship. And if you look very closely in the very back, you see the hooded figures of the Borellian Nomen following them, getting onto the Eastern Alliance ship. So in case you have ever wondered or seen that yourself, that question, the Borellian Nomen, it's very quick, and you have to kind of be, kind of eagle-eyed to spot it. But they do get on the ship with the Eastern Alliance enforcers. I assume they go back somewhere to Terra or what have you. Now, whatever happens to them, I have no idea. That's great to speculate. I think the comic book series has them getting recaptured and something like that. But, it's not really canon. But we have to just speculate in that, well, they went to Terra, and from there, who knows, right? It was just 3 Borellian Nomen on their own. And they were either going to die out, or they were going to have to, find some Terran women or something to continue the Borellian Nomen line. And so that's what happens with them. We don't really know what happens ultimately, but that was their fate. And the 3 of them, escape with the Enforcer. So that's Baltar's escape. And then, of course, that leads us to the next episode, Experiment in Terra, when we actually go to the planet Terra and kind of see what's going on there, and the big war and all of that, right? And so that brings that storyline to an end. But anyway, that's the episode review here on Battlestar Galactica Remembered, Baltar's Escape. Hope you enjoyed this one. Make sure to pop that DVD or stream it, whatever, and take a look at it once again. It's just great viewing. I love to do that. You look up those books, read the episode guide, and then you go watch the episode, and it is a lot of fun. But anyway, that's why we're doing this, right? To remind ourselves how awesome these shows really were, right? These episodes. And so anyway, we'll have another one soon. Hope you love it. Long live Battlestar Galactica, and I will see you in the next video.